Hello, friend, and welcome back to True to Ourselves. I'm glad you're here. We are going to be talking about courage today and taking you into how maybe you already are courageous. That's what I'm curious about. And yeah, so we're getting into that. I'm Kay. I am a formerly non-courageous person, perhaps is a good way to say it, or someone who did not feel courageous at all. And I created this channel because I wanted to help people who might also not feel very courageous for themselves, on behalf of themselves, to do so. And really, what it comes down to is trusting ourselves, which is why the show is called True to Ourselves, because I think that's, you know, staying true to ourselves, tuning into what's going on in here with everything else that's going on in our lives and supporting the people that we love and doing, a job that feels in integrity in our professional work. A lot of times there are things in our environment that can take us out of feeling um, true to ourselves. And so that's really my mission here is if you are somewhere along the timeline of maybe opening to this idea, well, I think you're in the right place and I'm glad you're here. And today I really wanted to bring my focus or our focus to this idea of courage and being courageous. Um, I I don't know if you've ever had someone say to you, "Whoa, wow, I'm really inspired by you. You're really inspiring," or "Wow, that was a really brave thing to do." And and I know what I used to do when people would say things like that to me was I would just be like, "Oh, no, no, you must be talking about somebody else. I'm not inspiring. I'm not brave." And you know, I understand that. I think is really I think is really what I want to begin with. Like we are conditioned to be self-deprecating and to be we're taught to think of that as humility and being humble. But I respectfully disagree with that now because I've discovered for myself that um, humility is really about understanding that my worth is no greater than, and it is also no less than anybody else's worth, right? And there is real courage, I believe, in in understanding that. Like if you try yourself, right? If you were to imagine me, well, you don't even have to imagine it. If you're here, if you're watching, if the journey that you're on is opening to being brave for yourself, well, that is incredibly inspiring to me. So I'm super inspired by you. And I'm curious when I say that, what feelings come up inside? Is it hard to receive that? If so, I understand. And and I think that's like all the meta level stuff we're going to talk about today because what I really want to do is take you into a couple of moments on my journey where there were these just small moments of courage that really felt I didn't feel that way at the time, but now I see and understand how they were courageous. And one of them was I lost the ability to walk in 2011. I needed a wheelchair for a long time. Um, and I can remember, during that time, I can remember lying in bed, and just remembering this line. It's funny because I've even forgotten where it's from. It might actually be from the movie The Shawshank Redemption. Such a great movie. I think it is. There's a part where one of the characters says, um, in this life, you've either got to get busy living or get busy dying. And I remember lying in bed one morning having that thought and sitting up and putting my feet on the floor to get up and saying out loud, you got to get busy living or get busy dying. And what I was really doing in that moment was making the decision to to keep going. Uh, I was in pain. I wasn't sure if I would ever walk again normally, or almost at all. By that time, I had begun getting some support. So like I had found a wonderful physical therapist after 8 months of having a doctor and a physical therapist who, while they were amazing people, just did not see this for what it really was. Like when I wasn't fitting into their rubric in terms of, um, for example, when my legs didn't take well to added increased reps or weight in terms of exercises, what happened to me was I became unable to walk again. Like we would get to a point where they'd be like, okay, now it's time for the next step. And I would try it and it wouldn't work because I would feel much, much worse and less able to walk. And at the same time, the doctor that I was seeing was distracted, was not, I'm sure that there were lots of things going on in their life that they just couldn't, they just could not, they were not seeing clearly what was happening for me. And every time I'd see them over this period of like 8 months, they'd be like, wait a minute, wasn't this a meniscus tear? Weren't we going to get you an MRI? Oh, we did get that MRI. Oh, and this is what so you actually don't have a tear. I wonder what that means. And it felt really frustrating. And at the end of that 8 months, where I was not getting the physical therapy or the medical attention um, that was helpful, my leg, it was my right leg, had atrophied to the point where the muscles that usually go out on a person's leg went in. And to this day, I mean, that leg is still smaller in muscles than the other leg. And I'm a person who has solo hiked across northern England, so like a country. And even with that, like uh, it's still after all these years, there's still this difference. And I want to say I almost never bring that up or think about it anymore. Like it is what it is. I'm accepting of it now. I get to do really fun things like hike and stuff. So I'm glad that I have these opportunities. But getting out of bed. So when I remember having that thought of getting busy living or getting busy dying, I was receiving support that was helping me feel like we can't. I remember going to see a sports medicine doctor and him saying, first of all, he listened to me as I poured out my tears and my frustration after 8 months of what I'd been living with. And he said, you know what, there's help for you. We can help you. And yes, we've seen someone, maybe we don't know your exact condition, but we see people all the time with the challenges that you, an athlete, face when you can't do the athletic things that you love to do. And if I'm thinking about courage, honestly, to hear this doctor call me an athlete, I almost couldn't accept that. I was like, oh, I'm not an athlete. But you know what? At that point, I had been a yoga instructor for like a decade. Not quite a decade. Yeah, actually a decade. And a skier all my life. Like, if I'm not an athlete, there's no such thing as an athlete. But at the time, I didn't feel brave enough to accept that. So growing into that, there's been some courage there as well. And then I went, and the universe provided the most wonderful physical therapist who he was an assistant physical therapist here in the States. He had left Venezuela because he needed to get away from the regime that was in place at the time, where educated people like him and his family were being hunted down and punished, basically. And he used to be the head of rehab therapy at University Hospital in Caracas. And when he had that position, he had it for 18 years. And there was a bit of a language barrier, that was his understanding, was that he was happy to be an assistant physical therapist in this physical therapy practice, and that he didn't feel he could progress because his mastery of English wasn't sufficient for him to feel like he could take the exams or do what needed to become a physical therapist, to become a doctor in this country, which is so interesting when I think about that, because that my experience of him was that he did great in English, but I'm not him, so I can't make him do what I wish he would do. Anyway, he was so helpful for me. And by the time I had the thought, it's time to get busy living or get busy dying, I was receiving the support that helped me sort of not feel overwhelmed or frustrated anymore, but instead to really have an assessment of where I was and to have the courage to sit up in bed and to do, I needed there was a cane, I needed to get steady on my bed and push myself up. And I did that. And that when I look back, that was a real act of bravery, getting out of bed that morning. So that was one way that this has looked for me. And then another way that that bravery has looked or courage has looked for me was or felt was in 2023, I did this hike across England. I solo hiked all by myself from the western coast. I started in St. Bees, which is this cute little village right on the coast, and I walked a path that is almost unmarked. It's very, very largely unmarked. It takes you really high and in wild, 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 wild places. There's all kinds of unpredictable, crazy weather. The ascent and descent along the whole trek is more than Mount Everest, or equivalent or more than Mount Everest. If you were to climb up and down Mount Everest, in other words, this was the same. And it's 192 miles. I hiked 160 of it. So I was exposed to a ton of that crazy weather and all the other stuff. And I say that because that's a pretty big, not everyone is going to do something like that. And what I've noticed now is that people just kind of go like, "Oh my God, this woman is in a whole different world. Like I could never do something like that." And the truth is, well, my personal belief, and I see this all the time in my coaching work, what I help people do is understand what they want to do and then do it. Because it may not be walking across England, but is it writing your book? Is it and sharing it with the world? Like, is it cultivating contentment and helping your family advocate for themselves rather than you feeling like you need to keep doing that? Like there's lots of ways um that we can have great lives and do what we feel inspired to do. And if it happens to not be solo hiking across a really rugged path on your own, that's great. Like you need to do what you're going to do. But I'm bringing it up because we do have this idea of like that we're not we don't have the capacity within ourselves to do anything like that, what someone else has done or what we want to do. And um the way I think about doing that hike is it was like a series of tiny moments that I kept having to decide, like, and decide and decide to take another step and to take another step. And the first one of those was getting on the plane. I was so afraid that me reaching for my own thing that I wanted to do, I think of it now as my own well-being, was going to be just like that plane would be slapped out of the air by the fates or something like that. Because how dare I want this and go for it? And having the courage to put that down, this thing that I'd kind of carried all my life, that like, I'm fate's plaything and not able to, I won't be able to do this. Like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, that kind of mentality. Putting that down and getting on the plane with like enthusiasm and joy, that was an incredibly courageous step. I see it now, like getting my bag packed, going to the airport, saying goodbye to my family, going through customs, all that stuff. Um, I did it in a really good energy. And again, it's partly because I did it myself, and I want to acknowledge that. Like the bravery came from in here. I did it with support. There were people who were helping me and cheering for me, and I allowed myself to receive that and feel that. And I'm just remembering one among many people who like my trip was half crowdfunded. Like so that enabled me to be able to stay in inns along the way. And um, it enabled me to get amazing pastels that I would never have been able to get prior, because they were quite expensive, and they were so good and fun for the outdoor on the spot painting that I was doing. So, um, but there was this one friend of mine who, her name is Catherine. She's known as the 5 kilo traveler because she lives in New Zealand. Uh, she she's figured out a way to carry a bag that is like for a 6 week trip to carry a bag that's 5 kilograms or less. Whereas I'm think my bag that I took was probably like 20 kilograms or something like that. I'm not as well versed in metrics, but it's like she could just wear it anywhere she wants. She just took all of her stuff with her all the time because it was so light. And so I remember it being in conversation with her just before I did this. It was probably 5 years after. It was I think almost exactly 5 years after Catherine herself had um had gone and taken this trip that she did. She's written a beautiful book about it called Dare to Travel Solo. Um, and when she was daring to do that, someone had told her. So here I was expressing, I guess, trepidation or nervousness about going and doing this big, long, it's going to be a 3 week hike that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be doing it all by myself, etc. And Catherine said, I'm not remembering exactly what it is. There's a triathlon that's especially for women. And apparently it's like one of the most rigorous triathlete events that there are in the world. And the mindset of the people who founded it, what they say is winning does not mean being the first one to cross the finish line. Winning means getting to the starting line. Like winning means being able to get to the starting line and start the race. And Catherine had shared with me that that was the attitude she took to her when she was planning and going on her solo explorations. She's the mother of two, she was married, she'd never done anything like this for herself. And um, so it took a lot of bravery for her to do that. And the idea of just getting to the starting line, meaning she'd already won, was really helpful for her. And I took that into my trip. That was really, really helpful for me. Because it really is an act of bravery to like get on the Logan Express that's going to take you to Logan Airport so that you can get on the plane. um, or packing your suitcase or dreaming it up in the first place. Like this is real courage. And I'm I'm so glad to know that because life is a lot better now that I know that. And as we're wrapping up, my question for you is, if you look back over your life, what's a moment where you were brave? Like when were you brave? When did you feel you had exhibited courage in your life? And what's possible for you if you remember that courage for yourself? Like, what does that open up for you in the future or the present, really, if you remember that you are brave and that you are courageous? um, yeah, that's where we're going to leave it today. Thank you so much for being here. I have created a group. It's called Dreamers and Doers. It is helping people live a fulfilled life, if that sounds of interest to you. It's a group in the school community, and it's just a fun, special place. So if you'd like to see more about it, the link is in the show notes. And until next time, I'm just wishing you really well, and I'm celebrating you for your courage. Thank you for being here along on the journey with me, and we'll see you soon. Bye.